Hi, Rupert, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Hello, Anas.
Hi, I think we're doing a video, a webinar after COVID, after a long time.
I know we haven't done a few of these. We did a couple
Yeah,
before, not as that
yeah.
often. Normally we talk on the telephone, but not in live stream.
Great. I think we will start the call now. It's a very proud moment for us in the sense that Hurun has been in existence for the last 25 years. Uh, and I think you started the business about 25 years back, almost at 1999. And in fact, I've been meeting a few entrepreneurs in India who created some really valuable business. And coincidentally, a lot of them have started the business around that time. So that year seems to be very special from a entrepreneurship perspective. So today, I thought for people who do not know about Hurun, just if anybody's listening here, uh, I thought would be nice to tell your story and how we started and how
Yeah.
it all began. It'd be nice to hear. So over to you, Rupert.
All right. Well, no, thank you very much, Anas. And yeah, 99 is quite a cool year because I did 1 year and I've already spanned 2 centuries. And sort of then if we manage 101 or 102 years, then we'll have spanned 3 centuries. So it's still the cheapest way of getting 3 centuries out of it. But it's already into our 25th year. So the official date, I think, is July the 20th. Funny enough, actually, I'd forgotten it. I didn't celebrate it this year on the 20th of July because this year being our 25th year has sort of been celebration the whole way through, and starting in January and probably going on to December. So then the actual date came about. I completely forgot about it. I think I was probably traveling or something, and I just didn't even cross my mind. No, for a business to start to survive for 25 years is something. I suppose it boils down to the mission in some respects. You've got to clearly, as a business, make money. That sort of goes without saying. But there has to be a sort of a vision and a mission, I think, that goes beyond just purely making money. And I think one of the trigger points, if you like, for starting a business was to try and tell the story of an economy through stories of people on a list. So I remember I'd been working at Arthur Andersen, which is like you, Anas. I mean, in our days, it was still a big five. And by the time it got to your days, I think Andersen's had gone belly up, they'd gone bankrupt, and been absorbed into some of the other big four now. And I've been working for them for about 7 years. And I always knew that I sort of quite liked the idea of starting my own business. But I didn't really know how to go about it. And so, come around, sort of the summer 1999, I was trying to think of a way to tell a story of an economy. And so I suppose I was in a training session at the time at Arthur Andersen. I remember scratching my head and thinking, well, how am I going to tell this story? And at the time, I wanted to tell the story for people in England, people, in the UK and across Europe and in the US. And so I started perhaps with the story of the China emerging market, because that at the time was the big hot story. Japan had sort of just peaked and dropped down, and China was now on its way up. And I was thinking, how do you tell the story of China to people in the UK, people in the Western world, I suppose? And I came up with the idea of trying to dig out the most successful entrepreneurs and then work backwards. And it was the stories of these people that tell the story of the modern economy of China. And it's quite simple. It's so simple. It's like actually a personification of the economy. So it was as simple as that. And I suppose many of these stories hadn't been heard before. And that gave an awful lot of media coverage. I remember actually in the second year of doing this, I was thinking, or even in the first year, I'd come up with my list. I started about July the 20th. I went on and I was sitting in London I was still working at Arthur Andersen. I was scratching my head and thinking, what am I going to do with this list? And I remember thinking, well, I could be greedy and I could keep the list for myself. But there's not much point. What am I going to still do with it? And so I remember talking to my father at the time, and he said, well, why don't you go out and get it published? Now, for an accountant, a young accountant, aged 29, I was an under 30 at the time, to get your list published in a big newspaper or media, it's like a big thing, because we're sort of more used to dealing with numbers and things like that. And so I started writing to The Economist and the Sunday Times, and a number of other sort of big media here in the UK, and they weren't really that interested. And when I say writing, in those days, I was sending faxes. And then, I then thought, well, okay, I'm going to try the Americans. So I started Fortune, Business Week, and Forbes. I wrote to them and said, would you be interested in, the first of its type, a list on the help us understand the Chinese economy. And then Fortune came back and sort of and and played around and never actually did anything. Business Week wrote back, again, quite nicely. They actually replied, whereas the British media didn't reply at the time. And then Forbes came back, and there was a global editor called Laurie Minard. And he said, this is brilliant, love to do it. So he did some sort of homework on me, I suppose. I had to sign a declaration form. Actually, it proved very useful. I had to get a declaration form from Arthur Andersen that this research had nothing to do with them. That was independent, because in my contract with Arthur Andersen, any, probably the same as you, Anas, at KPMG, but pretty much any initiatives that you come up with, all the IP would technically be owned by them. At least that was what was stipulated in my contract. So I had to get Andersens to clear me, if you like, and they were absolutely delighted to, because there was potentially a conflict of interest that if we ranked one of their big clients badly, then they might lose the whole deal, which might millions of dollars, if you like. But I mean, I suppose that's how it started, and so I got it published. First story as an accountant, and first story was published on the front cover of Forbes magazine. At the time, they made it very clear this was my story, my research. I wasn't an employee of theirs or anything like that. But it was quite cool. I remember about 2 or 3 weeks into that, and I then got a call from Seattle. It was from Microsoft. And they said, hey, would you like to come out and visit us? And so I took unpaid leave from Arthur Andersen and went out to Seattle. And actually, I stayed, believe it or not, with a VP of Microsoft, who at the time was really interested to try and do something, with China. It was just time the dot-com boom, 99. And they were trying to find a strategy of how to, get into, there was a company called China.com. There was a number of sort of very high-profile internet companies that were just going to market in NASDAQ. And so that sort of gave me quite a lot of confidence. Again, I was thinking, here I am, an accountant. I've come up with a cool story. It's really made an impact, if you like, even in the first year, and of telling people a personification of the economy of the time. So I suppose that's how it started. And then, but I still didn't resign from Arthur Andersen. I sort of hung on in there until actually the end of the sort of summer 2000. And what I did is I'd taken another set of unpaid leave and decided I'm going to see if my research really, I'd done the second list by this stage. And I said, I'm going to see if my research is really original. And so I took my research and went around Oxford University, Cambridge, my alma mater called Durham University. And then I went abroad. I went to John Hopkins in the US, in Washington. I went pretty much all over, Stanford and George Washington University. And I went all across Europe as well, France, Germany. I went to probably about 20, 25 universities. I all paid the whole lot myself, and I was broke, totally had no money whatsoever. But occasionally the university would give me enough money to have accommodation for a night. So, because I would write to them by fax again and say, look, I'd like to talk about some of the research I'm doing. But I suppose what came out of that, it gave me a lot of assurance that the research that I was doing was sort of valuable, was of interest, and was original. So, in a place called UC Berkeley in LA, I spoke to a professor who, and his students, and I was able to stand up, age 30, and present my research to the professor, who then became a very famous professor called Orville Schill. Already he was quite well known, and and be able to hold my own. And basically, I felt that the work and the research I'd come up with, the story that I was telling, was original. And that was the point at which I sort of said, right, that's it. I can, in my resignation notice to Arthur Andersen, and I was given, actually, I was given 3 months' pay, tax-free, which is how it works when you get sort of resigned or redundant, and sort of like it was a combination of the two. I was offered to take redundancy because our .com boom had bust, and we were offering 3 months' salary. And so I took it. I thought, what a great opportunity. I had £16,000 in my pocket, and I guess quite a lot of dreams. and it's funny because I think I met so many entrepreneurs over the years, and everybody's slightly different, obviously, in their story. And I guess in some cases, it's you have like a 5-year vision, and at the end of year 5, I'm going to package it up and sold it on. I never really had that. I was more like an animal, if you like, in the sense that, wherever things were going to take me, I went in that direction. I didn't have a plan of, right, at the end of year 2, at the end of year 4, at the end of 6, or something like that. I basically thought, what I want to do, and this is meaningful. I'm helping a lot of people understand an emerging economy. And I suppose that's sort of, and it was very difficult in those days, because there was no money to be made. I used to write articles at $1 a word, which it sounds kind of like a lot of money. You write 1,000 words, you get $1,000. Problem is that we do research, Anas, as you well know. And one number is like one word, but one number to measure the value of somebody's family or individual wealth might well take a number of hours. So a number of hours would all be rolled into $1, so like that. So it was very tough. And, in that period I was getting married. So luckily my wife was a doctor. So I was able to survive off her salary, basically. I didn't have any extra income. So in 2000, in my second year, third, fourth, and I think not many entrepreneurs would have probably had enough. My wife was lucky, or I was lucky that my wife was patient. I kept saying, it's going to come, it's just around the corner, it's just around the corner. And, we'd heard this she'd heard it so many times, but she still had patience with me. And so, anyway, eventually it did start becoming profitable, but it did take about 5 or 6 years to properly, start finding a business model that worked. I had to learn how to build a media. I had obviously no experience building a media. I had to learn how to, in those days, host events, and how to, sort of promote and elicit into the media. You have to then talk to the media. You are a media, but you also have to talk to other people, other media, and so on and so forth. So there was a very high learning curve as well. But anyway, I think I think there were a couple of times whenever. It seems to be every 5 years. I've had it a little bit this year as well. But every 5 years, I always feel, well, you need to decide, what is the purpose? Why do you continue? And I think one of it is, I think there's a sort of mission of trying to bring transparency to wealth creation. If you are a country with transparent wealth creation, I'm sure that is good for the economy in the long term. There was a story just before I started my first list in Indonesia, and there was a president of Indonesia who got a lot of media coverage for apparently owning $20 billion worth of assets. And I remember thinking to myself, how weird that president of a country can apparently or allegedly own that much wealth that hadn't been, sort of tracked. Surely that can't be good for the economy. If you can secretly, accumulate that sort of size of wealth and not be accountable to anybody but yourself and your family, then surely that has to be negative for the economy, for the long-term health of the economy. So I suppose that's something that always drove me, is you've got to be, there is a mission that if you bring some sort of transparency, many of these entrepreneurs, they come kicking and screaming. Some of them, they really don't really like it. They say, well, I might have a listed company, but I just need the listed company for other purposes. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. You go listed company, it's a double-edged sword. You have to, publicize exactly who the shareholders are and the stakeholders are. And so, as I say, some people come kicking and screaming, but generally speaking, I think the concept of the list, the rich list in the first product that I did, was about promoting, transparent wealth creation. I'm very proud. I think we've taken that on and done something similar like that in India as well. It is, and it makes me think. Sometimes I go traveling in other countries in South America or Southeast Asia or Africa, and funny enough, even Europe and the Middle East, of course. Sorry. And you realize that actually the amount of the number of stories that we've told across China and across India, especially, has actually significantly helped bring about transparent wealth creation. And that sense, it's a great sense of pride that, yes, of course, you're going to have those low flyers who go to extraordinary lengths to sort of keep their wealth out of the public eye, and with good reason. Should anybody know that, it's a bit like a government officer on a salary of, I don't know, $10,000 a year, wearing a watch on his hand, on his arm, that's worth, $100,000. It just, if that was made public, then that official would probably get arrested because it wouldn't be possible to make that money on a government salary. So some people do go to extraordinary lengths to hide their wealth. You and I have both seen that a lot. But the essence of what we're trying to do is trying to tell stories. It sounds really simplistic, but we're trying to tell attractive stories, trying to tell stories that have a meaning. And then secondly, we're trying to perhaps bring some sort of, I don't want to sound too naive or too idealistic, but I think by bringing a transparency to wealth creation, I think it makes the whole stakeholder ecosystems more engaged. Now, everybody in the world knows that Elon Musk has, like, say, 20% or whatever it is of Tesla, or that, but it's not a secret. It is what it is. People can understand it, and there's, you don't need to hide it under a bushel. So I suppose that's how Hurun Report started in the early days. I had just some initial thoughts.
Yeah. So one of the fundamental, I would say, misconception that people who began to know us, at least that's what we found in India, is that sometimes people think that we are a sort of a brashy brand who speaks about showing of wealth and all that stuff. But in the truest of essence, we are not really about rich list or showing of wealth part, right? I mean, have you faced such kind of discussion and thought process initially, and how have you seen that change?
Yeah, when I think of the audience that we have, so in the last year, for example, across the world, we probably hit 8 billion views on the Hurun brand, and that's not an insubstantial number, and it's driven primarily by our lists, on the personification of the economy. That's the rich list, or our startup lists, which might include the unicorns and the future unicorns, and then the under 30s, under 35s, we call it the youth series list, these young entrepreneurs. And so when I think about who our main audience is, I've always felt it's been wannabe entrepreneurs on the one side and entrepreneurs on the other side. So it's not an entertainment industry. We're not, yes, for some people, if Mukesh Ambani has a very expensive wedding, that gets global headlines, and there is this sort of a sense of entertainment to that sort of story. But for the most part, the people who are really interested in the list that we put out, I think it's about these young entrepreneurs. So when I think as to who we're trying to really talk to, it's about telling young entrepreneurs how to start up, giving encouragement. Look, there's a race to the top. These are the people that currently seem to be doing a really good job. So in the world, you've got the likes of Bernard Arnault, or you've got from LVMH, or you've got Elon Musk, you've got Jeff Bezos. They're very much sort of role models for a lot of young people. And these role models sort of help these young people, I suppose, hopefully go out and build a business of their own. And, fundamentally, in the UK, where I'm at the moment, the UK economy is under a lot of stress at the moment. We've got a big debt pile, and there's a lot of challenges around. And I say to myself, well, what can I do? What can I, as an individual with a relatively small company, we've got a nice history now, 25 years, but we're still a small company by big company standards. What can I do about it? Well, if I can promote young entrepreneurs and young businesses, then perhaps I can help the UK economy grow 0.001% or something like that. If we can, through our media impact and through the stories that we can tell, we can help young entrepreneurs get more visibility. We can get them into the startup ecosystem, the investors, the local government programs, maybe strategic partners and so on. We can give them a platform to encourage them to grow bigger, and then also show them role models, show them stories of amazing people who've gone before them. And perhaps they might think bigger, dream bigger. Often an entrepreneur is faced by the fact that their dreams are too small. They're limited by the size of their dreams. And in some cases, that's a real shame, because in some cases, they should be much bolder, much braver. But for various reasons, maybe they've got family pressure to not spend all their time with the business or whatever it is, they don't think big enough. But then the stories of some of these people who've been really successful, they think big, but they also have a great contribution to the economy. So I'm saying to myself, well, what can I do in the UK? Okay, I tell you what, I can do my best to promote these young entrepreneurs, and then hopefully that way we can help the UK economy grow. It's similar with India. When you and I started India, part of the mission was, bring wealth, transparency to wealth creation. That obviously goes without saying. Help the rest of the world understand what's going on in the Indian economy through the stories of these people. That's clearly critical. But then it is also about, sort of helping young Indian entrepreneurs sort of find their role models. They don't have to, if you're an Indian entrepreneur, why are you looking to Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates all in the US? There's so much amazing talent, raw talent in India. Let's start digging them out, and not just in India, like the very top of the India rich list that we put out, but what about the head of the richest or the most successful entrepreneur in your local town? These are more accessible role models. So I suppose that's something that if we do our job well, we can perhaps help people understand more about sort of entrepreneurship. And that should help India as a nation, the economy grow faster. UK as an economy, can grow faster, and all these other countries we're doing, Canada, Australia, in the Middle East, in China, obviously, and Southeast Asia now. So it's quite a I sometimes feel a real sort of burden of responsibility, because get it right, it's fantastic. You make mistakes, it's potentially not great. But I think on balance, it's pretty cool.
Out of all the list that you've made during the last 25 years, uh, if I were to split it into sections, let's say first 5 years, next 5 years, like that, I put 5 sections, right? What would be your favorite, in, let's say, in the first decade, and what kind of lists are your favorite in the next decade, and possibly in the last 5 years? What are your favorites?
Yeah, I mean, the way I think of our list is in three main parts, plus one. And the plus one slightly depends on who I'm talking to. So the first one is the Rich List series, the personification of the economy through the stories of these individuals. And that also is, we always talk about responsible wealth creation. So, almost as soon as I did my first Rich List, I was doing the first philanthropy list. We now have done philanthropy for 20 plus years. So this is something in India, it was on the same year. We did the India Rich List and we did the Indian philanthropy list. It's sort of totally linked. If you are making money, then almost, if you think of it, potentially, I think it's probably a bit idealistic, this idea, but potentially you would graduate from the Rich List to the philanthropy list. So one day your name will no longer be on the Rich List because you've given all your money away and you've graduated to the philanthropy list. Maybe that's a kind of like an amusing idea. But no, so that's one. The second one that I'm really proud of is something called the Unicorn series. And that's something that Anas, you and I have been working so closely together on. And it's really about promoting the startups of the future, giving a platform to these brilliant young in the unicorns, giving them a platform, helping them grow faster, help their dreams get bigger. And it's something I'm really proud of because, when we first sort of floated the idea of a unicorn, and there were so many different definitions all around the world. And so the first thing that we had to do was to come up with a standard definition, and then apply it at a global level. So, there were some definitions saying that a unicorn was a company that had to be a tech company that was only 10 years old and so on and so forth. And in the end, I came up with your help, between us, with a definition that was a startup from the 2000s, not yet IPO, and that's worth $1 billion or more. And that's it. There's no fourth one there. And I think this series is something that I've been very proud of because it's very much about the economy of the future. Many countries, they really care about it. So the British Prime Minister, often quotes the number of unicorns that, according to his standard, that the UK has got. And actually, frankly speaking, his standard is wasn't correct. But anyway, that's another story. And even in China, the president of China the other day was talking about why is the rate of new unicorns created slowed. And then just about 2 days ago, we got not just unicorns. The Chinese government issued an edict saying that we need to encourage future unicorn gazelles. So, so we didn't stop with unicorns. We then went one level down called the future unicorns gazelles, which are sort of startups from the same as they're the most likely to go unicorn within 3 years. And then we have another one below that called cheetahs, future unicorn cheetahs, which is most likely to go unicorn within 5 years. And the fact that they get a lot of, these companies are so important to an economy. If the UK economy wants to have a good future, it needs a lot of these future unicorns and unicorns. Otherwise, it's just going to be the same old traditional big companies out there, and they will sooner or later get, get out of date. And so, for a country to have a lot of unicorns is really important. And then the work that we do is we do it at a global level. Everything I do now is at a global level. So, be it the rich lists or the unicorns or the future unicorns, or even something that we call the under 30s, the youth series, a capital U with a small th. So the under 30s, the under 35s, the under 40s. This year I've added, because it's our 25th anniversary, the under 25s. And we do them global. Again, if you're an under 25 and you're a co-founder of a business worth $1 million US, you make our list. If you're under 30 and you've co-founded a business that's worth $10 million US, you make our list. Under 35 is 50 million, under 40 is 100 million. That's a superb platform. And we get so many people now applying for it, across the world, actually, especially, in China where we're very strong, but also in Canada and Australia. We're launching the under 25s even, can you believe it, in Australasia, across Europe, Middle East. It's a fantastic one. So that's my second series. I call it the Startup series. You have the Rich List series, the Startup series. And then the third one is really is the 500 series. So Fortune do a very good job. They have one of the most famous lists in the world. It's called the Fortune Global 500. But I found it frustrating because the Fortune Global 500 measures companies based on their sales. But their sales represents what they did yesterday. It doesn't represent what they do tomorrow. And so, unbelievably, there wasn't a list valuing all the businesses in the world based on value. And value, so if a company is worth, let's say, 100 million US, then that company, investors believe, will create 100 million US of profits over the next 10 or so years. So that's what value means. It's actually looking forward. So, for example, Apple the other day announced that they were making a partnership with OpenAI. And the Apple share price over the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks sort of rose, roughly speaking, by 10, 15%. They added something from 3 trillion to 3.5 trillion US dollars. Now that means that their sales revenue hasn't changed at all. The sales are still the same as they were the whole last year. It's literally sort of one day to the next. But their potential, investors suddenly realize that the potential profits that this company, Apple, could make were not 3 trillion US dollars, but now 3.5 trillion US dollars. So it's a highly complex sort of algorithm or dynamics that sort of go into a share price of a company. So my third list series is the 500 series, is trying to dig out the most successful or the valuable companies in the world, the Global 500, Hurun Global 500, Hurun Asia, India, China, Europe, and so other 500s. And that's my third big list that I suppose I've done. And that's had quite an impact. I use that list, Anas, to teach my children about what the global economy is. So if I'm trying to explain, look, forget sometimes the complexities of politics, because it's very much it's very complex. I say, you know what, if you really want to understand what's going on in the world, take the Hurun Global 500 as a list and compare it year on year. And you can really begin to see where the economic concentration of power is. And it's such a powerful, it's such a cool list. I really, really like it. So those are our three main lists, Anas. And the other ones that we do that I like particularly is the schools. We do a global high schools list where we rank the most, or the best, actually, high schools in the world. Nobody's ever done that before. We're about to do the global alumni list. So we're going to see, we're going to take the global rich list and then work backwards and see where they graduated from. It's all these sort of lists that talk about whether a university is good or an MBA course is good. They're great, they're good lists. But at the end of the day, did you go on to set up a business? That's become really successful. That's the global alumni list, and so on and so forth. So we did a lot of work in education and other things as well. Those are three main lists plus one.
Yeah. No, I think we've got 5 more minutes left. I just want to add one point here. In some of the question banks of competitive exams in India, like the civil service and the law exams and everything, we've seen the research from our various lists being quoted in the general knowledge section. So it's rightly like the way you're teaching your kids through the various lists that we do. This has in fact become a reference point. And that's sort of what our mission was, Rupert, in the sense that we wanted to be an objective, high integrity platform
Yeah.
that lets that would really be the source of what's happening in the country
Yeah, I
for
mean,
Indians and also for international audience. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, when we started Hurun India, and at the time, Anas, I wasn't looking to start Hurun India, and I was looking to find a head of global research. So, and I remember sort of coming across your CV and thinking this guy would be very good global research. And you and I met in England, down on the south coast. I remember by the seaside. Actually, funny enough, on National Day, if I remember, Indian National Independence Day, wasn't it? Yeah, it was quite a coincidence when we look back on it. And then you made this amazing decision to go back to India, because at the time you were living in the UK. You obviously graduated from the Oxford Said Business School, and you didn't need to go back, but you chose to go back, and you chose not just to go back.
I was working in the
and so you chose to go back and sort of set up Hurun India with me effectively, and I think that's something that I feel really proud of. That here we are, 12 years later. Sort of, we had that little dream, and at the time it was sort of, how are we going to take on a country like India? How are you going to produce lists that can earn the respect of this huge nation? And I suppose, Anas, it is a big question, but sort of, I'm very proud of the fact of what we've done in India, and with you. But I'd love to just use 1 minute of the remaining time to say, well, what drove you to want to go back to India when so many Indians overseas become NRIs and then sort of invest back into India gently?
I think one important factor was I had this economist chart, which really, which had my hand, which said there was a time when India and China had 40% of global GDP and so on. Then after 200, 300 years, India is down to 2%. And I was kind of inspired by what you did with respect to talking about Asian stories, starting from China to the rest of the world. And I really thought maybe I was ignorant, maybe I was stupid. I really thought the India time has arrived. I quite jokingly tell the people I meet, if I'd known that difficult to build a business, I would not have started. But it was absolute ignorance. And also I liked you. I connected with you very well. I mean, that was very, very important, right? I mean, I was recently married, settled in London, heading back. I liked you. And I thought I'd just take a plunge and see what happens. It was really a trial by the fire, exploring everything as days passed by. I think the one thing that we stuck on to Rupert in India was to, whatever happens, the platform's integrity will not be compromised. I mean, that's the only thing we focused on. And still a lot more to do. But yeah, that was really the reason.
Yeah, and I think, if we go forward for the next 25 years, I would say our responsibility is, or what my vision is, we need to basically embrace young businesses and young entrepreneurs. Because at the time, Anas, you were under 30, you were 28 or so, 28, 29 years old, almost the same age as when I started Hurun Global. And India is a huge country that's growing fast, and if we believe all the stats, then by the year 2050, it's going to be the world's #2 economy. By the year 2070, it might well be the #1 economy in the world. So, we've got our work cut out for the next few years. But to me, what I want to do is I want to really embrace these young entrepreneurs through our youth series, which is going to go global, and these unicorns and future unicorns. And as we get more sophisticated, sort of perhaps even, sort of basically promote these brilliant young entrepreneurs, around the world and to the startup ecosystem. So if we can do that, I think we can have an impact, perhaps, on helping India's GDP grow by 0.00001%. Even that's good enough. That's obviously, but that's sort of the idea, and at the same time give people confidence and help the world understand more about the story of the Indian economy. Through the stories of these individuals. It's a highly fluid, dynamic, complex economy, but my goodness, it's a lot of fun as well.
Yeah. That's it for today, Rupert. Thank you very much for your time. I think maybe once you're in India next time, we'll have a good face-to-face discussions recorded, more structured fashion. This 25th anniversary post came and LinkedIn. I thought we should definitely have a chat about it. And this will be recorded and put on our social media platforms. Everybody can see it. But lovely working with you, and hopefully look forward to building this further.
Lovely. All right, then. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. And Anas, thanks as always. Thank you.